Good morning and welcome. Annie Foerster here, minister at First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church in Fort Worth. I'm so happy you could join us for this service. We are continuing to record our Sunday morning offerings until it is safe to once again provide in-person services. There are advantages, you know. You don't have to silence your cell phone unless you want to. And you can talk back if you don't agree with me. Just don't let it become a habit. If you've never been to First Jefferson, or to any Unitarian Universalist service for that matter, let me tell you a little bit about us. We are a liberal, creedless church. That means we are a covenanted community, and we welcome a diversity of faiths, belief stances, and approaches to spiritual understanding and growth. In fact, you might say that diversity is our middle name. Oh, but that would make our name terribly long. Unitarian Diversity Universalist Church? No, let's just say diversity is our universal welcome. We're happy you've joined us, and I hope we get to know about you in the future. Next Sunday is our monthly Board of Trustees meeting. If you would like to attend the board meeting on Zoom, you are welcome to sit in as a visitor. If you have any questions or suggestions, the board members will be happy to consider them beforehand and add them to the agenda. Simply contact them at boardoftrustees@firstjefferson.org. In fact, you'd better go get a pencil and paper. I have a couple of links like this I want to share with you this morning. This afternoon at 2 o'clock, the Adult Religious Education Committee will offer a class titled Faith Forward. It is a guided path for new and familiar Unitarian Universalists to follow to help them navigate through the steps of becoming a member, serving as a leader, and to boldly live their faith. For more information and a link to the class, go to the First Jefferson group on Facebook. Last week, I experimented with a new format for these services. It seemed to adapt better with recording the services and you're watching them at home or on your phone wherever you are. There will be parts of the service familiar to you from the original order of service, but there will also be some surprises. If you would like to understand more about how and why services are structured the way they are, I refer you to the most recent weekend email about what's going on at First Jefferson UU Church. If you're not already on our mailing list, contact our church administrator at administrator@firstjefferson.org. That's a lot of information to absorb before we even start the service, so please settle in, calm your mind, and enjoy the prelude provided by our pianist, Misha Berestnev. My call to worship this morning is titled, Bless Our Contradictions. It was written by Michael Lunig. You gotta love our contradictions, those parts of us which seem out of character. Let us be boldly and gladly out of character. Let us be creatures of paradox and variety, creatures of contrast, of light and shade, creatures of faith. Let love be our constant. Let us step out of character into the unknown to struggle and love and do what we will. I want to welcome Della Purdent as our hymn leader this morning. Della came in on crutches. She is recovering from surgery on her foot and has 4 weeks to go before her surgery, before she can walk again. So our opening hymn is number 16, if you have the hymn book, and the words will be on your screen. I'll light the chalice this morning, and I think the words for the chalice lighting are on your screen. Say them with me, if you will. Wait a minute. There we go. May the light we now kindle and the time we share together anchor us to that inner flame, that sacred center which helps us remember who we were before the world told us who it wanted us to be. May our time together clear the way for those memories that help lead us back home and to create new memories and skills that will make us feel at home with what is bound to feel new. This is part of the new worship format. Early in each service, I will be introducing a question or two for you to consider, and throughout the service, I will provide my responses to the questions. They may not be the same as yours, but they will give you something to think about. I would love to hear your responses. You can email me at minister@firstjefferson.org, or at the end of the service, I will tell you how to become part of a weekly talk back that I call Let's Talk About It. So our topic this morning is integrity. There are two dictionary definitions to the word, and I will be considering both of them. The first is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. The second is the state of being whole and undivided. My first question then is, who are you really? You might consider, along with roles and professions and self-identifiers, the masks that you wear to protect the fragile you. My second question is, how do you live with your principles, both personal and scripted? You might consider the strengths of your principles as well as the moral pitfalls you sometimes encounter. The overall question, of course, is, what does it mean to be a person of faith living with integrity? As I said in my welcome this morning, we are a covenanted faith. That means we agree on how we will be together, even when we disagree about questions of faith and belief, especially if we come from different backgrounds and travel different social and spiritual paths. On your screen at this time is the general covenant we repeat every Sunday, an affirmation of our basic agreement. Please say it with me. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. In addition, we have in our denominational bylaws 7 principles that member congregations agree to affirm and promote. Just briefly, they are the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Compassion, by the way, is the topic of next Sunday's service. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and finally, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. We usually sing a doxology at this part of our service, and I've asked Della to sing it with us.
Till the stars have heard, in joy feast on this bounteous word. Our praises call us to explore, till sun shall rise and set no more.
Most of you know that Della is a member of the choir co-chair of the music committee, in addition to leading our hymns this morning. And I have asked her to speak to our occasional segment of the service that throws a light on membership. Della, would you put Della on the screen? There we go.
So, I was asked to talk about how the closure has affected our family, and I mean, we haven't really been able to get out and do much. I mean, I've been recovering from surgery, and as my doctor has told me, that recovery is a full-time job, and it is exhausting. You would not think that sitting on your behind for many, many hours a day would be exhausting, but it is. Scrolling through social media and listening to audiobooks to further my mind is tricky, and especially in this day and age where things are so unrested. And so we try to take time for ourselves. We try and spend time with our families and with the kids and with my husband, and we play games and we tell stories, and that's pretty much been our life for the last 8 weeks now. Yeah, it's been about 2 months. That's pretty much been our life, and that's about all I've got.
Thank you, Della. I think probably most of us have some of the same reactions to this restriction of being at home, and I'm glad we could provide you a way to get out of the house this morning. Thanks for being here. I want to start my first response with a reading by Mark Nepo titled "The Ever-Present Riddle of Being Who We Are." He wrote, "I keep returning to the ever-present riddle that being who we are is the necessary adventure. It unlocks everything, not because our self is so important, but because our essential nature that our self carries is the immediate doorway to everything that is life-sustaining. We learn early on that being who we are means fending off unwanted influence without cutting ourselves off from the chance to learn from others. Regardless of the culture we are born into, it isn't long after we arrive that everyone starts pointing and telling us where we need to be and what we need to do to get there. There's no time to really ask why. Soon things happen and we are thrown off course, and now there's all this effort to win their approval no matter who they are. If lucky, love will distract us more than suffering. If blessed, we are broken of everyone's plans and regrets and thrown like a hooded bird into a sea of light. If, trusting the fall, we find our wings." I love that imagery. The ever-present riddle of being who we are. You would think we would know by now, but I'm constantly surprised that I'm still learning who I am. Did you ever have to do that exercise at a workshop that's designed to help you to get to know one another and yourself at the same time? It goes like this. Someone says, "Who are you?" And you respond however you usually respond to that question. But then they ask, "No, who are you really?" And you have to give another response. And this goes on until you run out of responses. Who are you really? The idea is that you start with the surface identities, probably name, gender, and then you go on to the roles you carry: daughter, sister, mother, teacher, minister. As the question, the same demanding question continues, you begin to dig a little into your beliefs, into your principles. I am a lover of peace. I am a person who stands by her friends. I am a person who, whatever you can come up with. I've attended a lot of such workshops. To tell the truth, I eventually got tired of that exercise. It became a game to me. It was helpful at first, But then I just quit digging, quit thinking about my responses. They became rote. And when I got bored with it, I was usually able to end it by saying, I am a spirit having a human experience. I guess some people thought that was profound. I know I did when I first read it somewhere. It wasn't original with me. And then they would quit asking me and move on to the next person. But you know, I was thinking about this exercise this week because I thought of a response I have never thought to give before. A description of who I am I guess I never considered important enough to, well, consider. I mean, my name is what I'm called, what I respond to. The fact that I'm a woman is huge in my identity because if you ask me what are the difficulties and the joys of being a woman, I could go on forever with stories, illustrations, complaints, and celebrations. And the same with roles. The principles get a little more complicated and you get into that second question, do I live my life according to what I say I am? But here's a piece of my identity it never occurred to me to mention, and now that I think about it, its absence is huge. I'm white. I'm non-black. I'm a person of whiteness. Now, I know why I didn't think of it before. It's because I was taught that that's the norm. Only that which deviates from the norm has to be considered, right? Mentioned, pointed out. You would never read an article about me that began, Annie Foerster, a white woman living in Fort Worth. Yet every newspaper or television news program description of someone not like me is defined by a comment about their complexion. And I think, oh my God, no wonder we have such a difficulty with these racial issues. I am a person who thought she had rooted out all the stereotypes that I had been fed as a child. I am a person who has done the work of admitting to my hidden prejudices and holding them to the light of day. I am a liberal minister, a Unitarian Universalist who admits to the privileges I have had from birth. But it never occurred to me to identify myself by the obvious, to admit that much of what drives me is the early planted assumption that I am a member of the norm. I don't believe I'm the norm, but I do believe that much of what drives our institutions is the belief of so many people that this is the God-given truth, that this is the norm. And I don't have any immediate answers to how we solve the biggest problem our country faces today. But I do have a recommendation to practice in the meantime. Never stop asking yourself the question, but who am I really? We can't face our friends or our enemies until we really know the answer to that ourselves. That's a lot to think about already. And there is part 2 to this first question, but I need to clear my head before I attempt it. And I thought a generosity report and a hymn might do that for both of us. The staff is continuing to get paid and are, if possible, working from home or showing up in a safe manner at the church, thanks to a grant/loan from the government payroll protection plan. Thank goodness for that. As we said last Saturday, Turner Bridgeforth will receive a generous cash gift from us as he moves to Boston for continuing his seminary education. The gift comes from a previous quarter of Share the Plate and generous donations that have come in from members of this congregation since his last sermon with us. We thank you for your continued contributions and your regular pledges. And now please join me in singing our next hymn, number 124, Be That Guide.
Be that
So I'm still on the question of how we determine who we are, because if we don't know the answer to that question, we cannot determine if we live our lives with integrity. I think we go through our entire lives thinking we do know the answer, and then we get caught short by a new insight, whether it's brought on by a group exercise or a friend's comment, our own journal writing, if we are honest, or a mirror shoved in our face by an experience that didn't turn out the way we expected it to. I was a shy child, pathetically shy. I didn't like it, but I didn't know what to do about it. I thought it was who I really was, and that it was something that couldn't be changed. But at one point in my life, and I think maybe I was 10 or 11 years old, we moved to a new community, and I thought, these new people don't know me. They don't know how pathetic I am. What if I acted differently in some way? Would they believe I was more like them, better than who I really am? Well, my first opportunity came in the new school I attended when the English teacher told us that we were going to be writing an essay every week, and if we wanted extra credit, we could volunteer to read our essay out loud to the class and get experience in public speaking. My first thought was, no way. But it could be the answer. If they didn't know I was too shy to get up in front of them to read my work, they wouldn't think I was such a dork or a nerd or whatever the word was when I was 10 or 11. So the first opportunity to volunteer came, and I literally had to raise my right hand by holding onto my elbow with my left hand. And it worked. I wasn't as shy in that school as I had been in the previous one, well, except for inside, where I was still pathetically shy. And the next time I moved, I added another aspect to my personality, and another at the next opportunity. We moved a lot when I was young. And when I began work, I used the same tactic when I joined a new company or met a new group of coworkers. By that time, I was in my late 30s, and I was perfect. I had created the person I always wanted to be, confident, fearless, self-assured. Only I knew there was still a little girl inside running the show, scared to death she would be found out. And eventually she was. Or rather, I had to admit to the reality because of being scared was too stressful a way for me to live. And I spent the next 40 years of my life taking off my masks one by one, stripping off my armor, looking for who I really was. Who am I kidding? I'm still in the process of doing that. Some of the masks became a real part of me. I grew into them. I became that person I wanted to be. I earned them. I deserved them. But here's the thing. I didn't really grow up until I began to ask, who am I really? Until I began the process of not lying to myself and to other people. Now, I believe this is something we all go through to one degree or another. Some of us need more masks and armor than others before we can start asking the question. Some of us are better at the process than others, or started earlier. When I was studying psychology, before I began studying theology, I came across this syllogism. For humans, no growth is possible without change, and no change is possible without two existing conditions: a community that accepts you for who you are and provides you with models for who you might become. If this isn't the definition of a Unitarian Universalist church, I don't know what is. I just want to remind you that this is a safe place to explore who you are and who you purport to be. I'd like to share with you a story for all ages now, so if you have children or people who just like listening to stories, call them in. This one's called A Catch of a Lifetime. He was 11 years old and went fishing every chance he got. from the dock of his family's cabin on an island in the middle of a lake. On the day before bass season opened, I put this in italics in my script because this is important to the story. On the day before bass season opened, he and his father were fishing early in the evening, catching sunfish and perch with worms. And then he tied a small silver lure to his line and he began to practice casting. The lure struck the water and caused colored ripples in the sunset, then silver ripples as the moon rose over the lake. Then suddenly his pole doubled over, and he knew something huge was on the other end. His father watched with admiration as the boy skillfully worked the fish alongside the dock. Finally, he very gingerly lifted the exhausted fish from the water. It was the largest one he had ever seen, but it was a bass. The boy and his father looked at the handsome fish, gills splaying back and forth in the moonlight. The father lit a match and looked at his watch. It was 10 p.m., 2 hours before bass season opened. He looked at the fish, and then he looked at the boy. "You'll have to put it back, son," he said. "Dad!" cried the boy. "There will be other fish," said the father. "Not as big as this one." He looked around the lake. No other fishermen or boats were anywhere around in the moonlight. He looked again at his father. Even though no one had seen them, nor could anyone ever know what time he caught the fish, the boy could tell by the clarity of his father's voice that the decision was not negotiable. He slowly worked the hook out of the lip of the huge bass and lowered it into the black water. The creature swished its powerful body and disappeared. The boy suspected that he would never again see such a great fish. And that was 34 years ago. Today the boy is a successful architect. His father's cabin is still there on the island in the middle of the lake, and he takes his own son and daughters fishing from the same dock. And he was right. He has never again caught such a magnificent fish as the one he landed that night long ago. But he does see the same fish again and again, every time he comes up against a question of ethics. For as his father taught him, ethics are simply matters of right and wrong. It is only the practice of ethics that is difficult. Do we do right when no one is looking? Do we refuse to cut corners or get the design in on time? Or refuse to trade stocks based on information that we know we aren't supposed to have? Well, we might if we were not taught to put the fish back when we were young, for we would have not learned the truth. The decision to do right lives fresh and fragrant in our memory. It is a story we will proudly tell our friends and grandchildren, not about how we had a chance to beat the system and took it, but about how we did the right thing and were forever strengthened. It's a good story, one to think about. Let us sing another hymn. This is number 86 in our hymn book, Blessed Spirit of My Life.
Let me know
I do have more responses to my questions, but while you think about your answers or the additional questions those answers raise, let's look at the stories that live in this community. In the Good News Department, First Jefferson has just written a check for $5,000 to Eastside Community Assistance to help in their outreach work in this part of Fort Worth. The money came from a grant we applied for with the Unitarian Universalist Association. Betty Churchman, a member here, saw the offer of the grant and told Colleen Brewer, another member, who is on the East Side board, and she and David Winkowski, president of our board of trustees, were responsible for applying for it. East Side provides food, shelter, and clothing to those who need it and will put the money to good use. A note from Patrick and Judy Gutierrez tells us of the plight of Judy's sister Jackie, who lives in Olathe, Kansas, with her daughter Christy. Jackie has Alzheimer's disease. Recently, neighbors realized they hadn't seen Jackie, Christy, or their dog for several weeks. And when they went to investigate, they found Jackie malnourished, dehydrated, and underweight. It appears that daughter Christy has also succumbed to Alzheimer's and cannot take care of herself, much less her mother. Patrick and Judy are doubly frustrated they cannot be with their family during this crisis, and they ask that we keep them in our hearts and say a prayer. They will let us know when they hear more. In fact, Patrick told me this morning that Jackie is better, and a friend of hers is applying to help her take care of her business problems. There are many stories that live in this community. We don't get to hear all of them, but we know we keep one another in our hearts, and that's what matters most. Let us take a moment of silence to consider those we miss by being isolated from them, and those we look forward to seeing when the world changes once again. Misha? Okay, this is where the question of ethics and integrity comes in. Do you throw the bass back if no one saw you catch it, or do you keep it? The question is usually framed this way. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, there's no one on the road but you and no traffic coming from either direction. A 4-way stop is coming up. There are no trees or bushes, and you can see there's no cross traffic either. So, do you stop at the stop sign? Do you slow down, make a rolling stop? Or do you just keep driving because all you want to do is get home and it's late and you're not hurting anyone? That last part is the excuse that gets you off the hook if you need it. I wasn't hurting anyone. In the lake where I grew up fishing, the size limit on perch was 12 inches. Freshwater perch are my favorite fish to fry up. Full disclosure, I have eaten an 11-inch fish. When I worked the night shift as a telephone operator, I perfected the rolling stop. It was late when I got home. But let's ask those tougher questions. Here's one. Do you keep your friends' secrets when you know them? Secrets are such delicious stories. Are you tempted to tell them to people who don't know your friends personally because they'll never find out? I know a person who, you don't know her, but she, It's not easy to have unimpeachable integrity. You know it's not easy when people offer to give you allegorical stories to help you live up to your promises. This is a story about 3 gates. Each of the gates is narrower than the one before, and if you can pass through all 3 gates, then you can tell what you know, the story's teacher tells us. Can you keep a secret? Before you speak, pass it through 3 gates of gold. First, is it true? Then, is it needful? Be honest here. And the last and narrowest is this: is it kind? If it passes through these gateways 3, then you may tell the tale nor fear what the result of your speech may be. So, ready for a tougher question than that? Questions that we might ask of our Unitarian Universalist faith, for instance. In these times that lift up and highlight the racial injustices in this country, we are asked by our faith leaders to be part of a process of dismantling the institutions of white supremacy. I think we might have to summon up all our integrity to do that. The Reverend J. Wolin warms us up to the task with these questions. Are we a people of holding on or letting go? Holding on to the rigid ideas or letting go and opening our minds and our hearts to something new? Holding on to the certainty of how things should be, or letting go and living with the uncertainty of new ways of being in the world? Holding on to what makes us uncomfortable, or makes us comfortable, or letting go so we may grow, which can be uncomfortable. Holding on to what makes us safe, or letting go to make room to help others feel safe. Let our chalice, this symbol of our religion, let it be a symbol of burning up the ties that hold us back from being our true self and reaching our true potential. Let it be a symbol of lighting a new way for us into a better tomorrow, and let it be a symbol of letting go, because holding on too long and too tightly is never good for your soul. How do we help to dismantle racism? Dismantle the institutions of white supremacy? What privileges do we have to surrender in order to do so? Isn't that the ultimate question that everyone asks? And I don't have the ultimate answer, not for you or for myself, not yet. But on your screen you will see a link to a parable on privilege, on acknowledging wealth and white privilege with integrity. It was given some months ago by DeRoe K. Farrar, the director of music at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Portland, Oregon. I wanted you to be able to see the whole service, and so if you follow the link on your screen, you will. I think you would gain some insight by seeing the whole thing. Just in case you don't get around to it, though, this is how he ends his comments. He said, "Here's what we should be saying. Denounce all your privilege and give it to those with none." And then he adds, "Look, as a black man, white people often frustrate me. There's nothing inherently wrong with being white. And if you ask me, there's nothing inherently wrong with lacking racial diversity. That is, unless you're a Unitarian Universalist and your faith demands it of you." Which brings me to another question. What does our faith demand of us? What can we do to respond to the continuing examples of horror that hold up white supremacy at its ugliest? What can we do to respond to racial disparities? Speak out against continuing atrocities. Be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Maybe another question is, what are we already doing? And if you have a part of that answer, let me know. In the meantime, here are my feeble recommendations. First, ask yourself who you really are and who you want to be. I've said it before, but we cannot help anyone if we aren't sure where we stand and how strong we can and need to be. Next, get educated. This is the first step to social justice work. Know what you are standing up for and what you are standing against. And there are many ways to do that. Talk to other people. There's nothing any of us can do alone. And listen. Listen to someone with another experience, another point of view. In this regard, I'm going to invite you to join me this coming Tuesday for a talk back on what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist of integrity. I was going to post a Zoom link in the weekend newsletter, but it didn't happen, and I will get a message out to you either with an email or on Facebook Monday or Tuesday. But save 7 o'clock on Tuesday in the evening, and we will have a conversation about the questions and responses brought up by this Sunday service. And another thing you can do is read to gain experience you don't already have. I'm instituting a new feature on our website and in our weekly emails and monthly newsletter called the Bookshelf. It will recommend books that might have the answers to the questions that you are asking. And you can contribute to that list, suggesting your own titles with a little blurb telling us what we might learn from the book. The first 3 books on the shelf will be White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, which the book club here has already reviewed. How Not to Be a Racist by Ibram Kendi, who says we have to move toward being a non-racist, all of us. And Black Democracy by Eddie Godd Jr., which I am currently reading and finding new understanding on the history of racism, its backlashes, the lack of government attention to it, and suggestions of how to take it apart. Final suggestion on doing something is get involved. Locally, support East Side Community Assistance, which is helping to ease the pain of those crushed by current events. Also locally, but with a greater reach, help to get out the vote, help to get the right political leaders in office. There is a Unitarian Universalist program going on called UU the Vote. You can go to the association at uua.org, to their website, and check it out. In fact, I just read recently that during General Assembly at the end of this month, they are looking for 800 volunteers who will call people in your own area and help them register to vote or encourage them to go to vote. And finally, there is a new report out from a commission that has been studying the questions around our democratic system that discourage justice for all. It is called the Commission on the Practice of Democratic Citizenship. Their full report can be found at amacad.org/our-common-purpose. They set out 6 areas for improvement and 31 suggestions for how it might be done. They recommend that each of us, or groups of us, choose one of these suggestions and work on it. That's the only way it's doable, the only way we'll ever get rid of the injustices we've inherited with the practice of white supremacy. This is a lot to throw at you, and all of it will be spelled out in future publications and online. If you're tired of being trapped inside your home by the pandemic, do something useful. Educate yourself. Talk and listen. Do something useful. Do it because you are a person of faith and a person with personal integrity. Please join me for our closing hymn, Be Ours a Religion.
Its creed
extinguish this chalice with the hope that we too may find a container for all of us who we are, a holy chalice able to hold our courage and our fear, our gifts and our flaws, our joy as well as our pain. May we glimpse again what it means to be whole. May we find that peace of knowing that no part of us needs to hide. The benediction this morning is from Carl Jung, who said, "Become who you are. Become all that you are. There is still more of you, more to be discovered, more to be forgiven, and more to be loved. So may it be in all our lives." Isha.